Welcome everyone to our webinar today. I am so excited to bring you the third of our three-part series on Teams. In this session, we're going to talk about how our clients use CAM for Microsoft Teams to drive value. I am Sherry Kappel, a Litera evangelist here. And I have the privilege of welcoming the two speakers who are going to share their stories about CAM implementations with Microsoft Teams. So Adam, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Perfect. Thanks, Sherry. Hi, everyone, and thank you very much for joining. I'm Adam Ryan. I'm actually an employee of Litera now, so I'm VP of Product for Litera, but until very recently, I was the Chief Legal Innovation Officer at Freshfields. So I'm going to cover Freshfields' implementation of CAM for Teams today.
Thank you, Adam. Stuart, let's hear from you.
Hi, I'm Stuart Smith, formerly IT Director with the law firm of Sussman Godfrey. I spent 15 years in that role and recently stepped down, and now I'm a consultant for Sussman.
Well, we are so excited about what the two of you will share today. So let's just talk a little bit about our agenda. We're going to do a brief summary of parts 1 and 2 in the event that you were unable to see those. Then we're going to have our customer panels discussion with Adam and Stuart. And throughout, please feel free to put your questions into the questions panel of the GoToWebinar control panel there. First, some housekeeping rules. We are going to have our webinar. It'll be about 60 minutes long, including the Q&A. We'll probably reserve about 10 minutes or so at the end to answer as many of the questions that you ask as we can. All participants are muted. The webinar is going to be recorded and will be sent to you via email. And then for any questions that we can't answer during the webinar today, we'll send emails to you to address those answers. Okay, so let's just do a little brief rewind on sessions 1 and 2. Session 1 was how to unlock the power of Microsoft Teams. This was such a great baseline session about why Teams in legal and what some of the complications are. How firms are elevating their Teams experience with automatic provisioning, enhancing efficiencies with next level templating capabilities, adding the missing governance pieces to Teams through the CAM security controls, and best practices around Microsoft Teams in a virtualized desktop environment. Session 2 was also equally rich in things that you all have been asking questions about. In this session, our experts chatted about the value of Litera's integrations with Microsoft Teams, how to co-author with iManage, using documents from iManage and Microsoft Teams, storing them there, and then the possibilities of co-authoring and extended collaboration capabilities across various workflows when leveraging the power of 365 and Microsoft Teams with Litera. So these are the talking points we're going to go through here in session number 3. And so with that, let's go ahead and take these slides off the screen. And what we're going to do is go ahead and chat through hearing the stories from Adam and Stuart. So Stuart, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. What was the main problem that you were solving when looking to implement Teams at Sussman Godfrey? And also, if you wouldn't mind, can you tell us a little bit about Sussman, please? About the firm, the size of the firm, your practices, etc.
Sure. Thank you for having me. Sussman Godfrey is a litigation-only law firm. We specialize in litigation. We have around 200 attorneys, 300 plus people total across 4 different offices. Litigators are very challenging to keep rounded up, and therefore we needed a good way to do collaboration with those litigators and our experts and our co-counsel and clients. So that was the reason why we took a look and moved towards Teams collaboration.
Great. I know that litigation documents are also very troublesome, just the volume of them. I can't imagine. I think that would be an important problem to solve. And how about you, Adam? Tell us a little bit about the implementation at Freshfields and what problems you were trying to solve there.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Sherry. So Freshfields is a full-service international law firm. So Freshfields has 28 offices across multiple different regions around the world. So in Europe, the US, and Asia. Has 2,000 lawyers with over 5,000 employees. So a very, very big firm. And what we're kind of looking at for the Teams implementation was kind of trying to solve one key pain point, which was how do we give lawyers access to all of the tools that they need to run a matter end to end within an application that they already use? So that was kind of the key pain point that we're trying to address around how to do that. So what are some of the things that we're looking at in Freshfields to make sure that we're giving that to lawyers directly? They were documents, making sure that lawyers could access the documents they needed very, very easily from within one interface to be able to access the collaboration tools that they wanted to use on their particular matter, which differs by the type of matter. If you're doing a litigation like Stuart's firm, it's a very different type of a matter than if you're doing a transactional type of work. So documents collaboration were the first two key pieces of information that we wanted to surface to lawyers in a very easy and intuitive manner. The third is the legal technology that's available on that particular matter. Again, this differs by the type of practice that each individual lawyer is working on. The knowledge materials that is relevant to that matter, and also the different services that exist within the firm. So that was the kind of the key pain point. How do we take all of that information, which currently lives in different places with different login screens, with different interfaces, and bring it into one single pane of glass? And that's where we really saw a fantastic opportunity for teams to bring that together, to bring all of those disparate things that the firm was looking at into an application that lawyers are using every day, and make it very, very simple for them to access each of those resources at the point in time in which they needed it. So, Sherry, that was kind of the key pain point that Freshfields was looking at in its implementation of Teams for legal matters.
Bringing that together in a single interface, that is such a great aim. So I'm really eager for us to explore that further. So Stuart, first, I do have a couple questions for you. What went into your decision for Microsoft Teams? For instance, was it the pandemic or remote work that was a facilitator, or how did that play into this, if at all?
Yeah, I don't really think the pandemic played a big factor in our decision, although the timing was during the very beginning of the pandemic. We were having challenges anyway, collaborating and getting information sharing done between our attorneys, what really our trial teams, and the parties involved in the trial team. So we had people using different systems for different things, and we were really trying to get some governance and some control around what they were doing. And the Teams CAM solution really seemed to fit what we were trying to accomplish. Wonderful.
And again, it sounds as if you almost got started sort of before the pandemic, a bit prescient there to bringing together this tool. How about you, Adam? What sorts of decisions went into your implementation of Teams?
Yeah, well, I think one of the kind of big things to address at the moment are people are doing it anyway on Teams. People are using Microsoft Teams in order to run legal matters. And the problem that we're having is that's completely done ungoverned and unstructured. And we all know, working in law firms, that we need to be able to pinpoint and identify exactly where client and matter data is held and used by the firm for a variety of different things, for confidentiality, for retention, for regulatory purposes, and so on. So, one of the key things is most people are already doing this anyway. They're having kind of one-on-one chats in Teams about things that are covered by matter privilege. They're sharing files. They're already collaborating in 365. And so one of the kind of key decision points around this was, how do we don't discourage that, because we love it when lawyers kind of try new things and adopt new technologies, but how do we do it in a way that actually puts some governance framework around how they're doing it? So that was like the first key point, is that people were doing it anyway and we needed to kind of address it. I think the second kind of key factor that came up is there's a real desire in firms at the moment, particularly around some of the cost pressure and the budgetary pressures that a number of firms are facing, around how do you get the most out of what you've already got in your kind of technology stack. And there's kind of a real push at the moment to make sure that each and every firm is using each of the applications in its stack to its potential. So when we looked at this solution at Freshfields, we were saying, we already pay for an E5 license from Microsoft. Let's make sure that we get the most out of that that we possibly can for the firm. And then I think the kind of final point was really trying to mirror the way that clients are working. So when we look to our clients, they're all using Microsoft Teams and SharePoint and OneDrive to manage their own internal work. We should be mirroring the exact same way that our clients work as a law firm as well. So I'd say they're probably the three key reasons for the decision making at Freshfields to push ahead with this project.
Thanks, Adam. And I guess too, Stuart, for you, when you put together your implementation, were you deciding for this to be just internal collaboration or for third parties, external? What was the sort of scope of the usage of it?
Our scope was everybody needs to get access to this involved in the trial team, whether that's just an internal team or we have experts outside the firm, or we have co-counsel or even the client. So we were looking at internal and external parties and needed to be able to accomplish that because that's what they were doing prior to us implementing this, using a variety of software solutions that maybe we weren't all real happy that they were doing it the way they were doing it. So this
Right.
goes back to Adam's number one point, which is governance.
Governance and knowing where all the documents are. And Stuart, how do you use Teams? The big question in everyone's mind here is, what about the document management system?
Yeah, so one of the great things that we and why we went this direction was with CAM, we were able to select certain folders from a workspace in iManage and copy those documents down to Teams. And in Teams, CAM would provision a series of channels and folders, some general, some private. And the information from iManage would actually be in Teams because our attorneys, surprise, don't really like working in iManage. So this gave them the ability to get the information they needed, but stay out of the document management system, and we still have governance over the documents.
Wonderful. And Adam, how about you all? How did you implement that in relation to the document management system?
Yes, so one of the key focuses was how do we ensure that the document management system remains the system of record, because that is kind of, to the governance points we've just been discussing, most of the risk and compliance departments at firms will insist that all matter data ends up in the document management system in some way or another. So it was very, very key for Freshfields to work out how to put the document management system front and center of the team solution. So the way that it was rolled out is for every team site that you open through the Teams interface, you would get pre-configured channels and pre-configured tabs, depending on the type of matter that you opened. So if you're opening a transactional matter, you would get certain channels. And if you're opening a litigation matter, you get something different. On each of those channels, the very, very first tab that is auto-provisioned through the CAM solution is the exact folder for iManage that the documents sit in for that particular matter. So you don't have to go looking through your document management system to kind of find the right client and matter. It already knows what is the right folder structure in iManage, and that is the first tab that you got on every single channel. So it's really, really useful, even for the lawyers that love working in the kind of iManage 10 interface. They're able to find their documents much, much easier through using the Teams application because the DMS was pinned as a tab for every single team site that was open for that particular matter. So that was incredibly helpful. We got really amazing feedback at Freshfields in relation to just making it super easy for lawyers to be able to access their documents. And just to pick up on what Stuart was saying, the key points around using Teams, I mentioned this in my intro, is to unlock some of the collaboration capabilities that come with Microsoft 365. So very, very kind of rich co-authoring experience that you get as part of the kind of native 365 co-authoring experience. And if you're working on a witness statement in the litigation sphere where you have a number of different people that need to kind of feed in information into a witness statement, or you're working on a due diligence report in the transactional sphere, you have, typically you could have up to like 10, 20, 30 people all needing to be in a document and working on it at one time. And that's where you really get the power of using the collaboration features in 365. So what CAM enabled as part of Freshfield's implementation of Teams was the ability, as Stuart just mentioned, to take that document from iManage, temporarily copy it across into Teams, use the Teams capabilities to do that very, very rich collaboration experience. And then once you're finished, you could check in the document from Teams. It goes back in as a new version in iManage, and then the document is removed from the kind of Teams interface. So it really kind of helps that kind of security story, that governance story, but also unlocks the important collaboration features that we want lawyers to use, because there's a whole heap of efficiency benefits that just come with the workflow that I was just describing. Gone are the days where a poor kind of paralegal or trainee solicitor or attorney needs to take the input from 10 or 12 different people and kind of mark it up into the new version. So we really want people using these modern ways of collaboration, but we want to be able to make sure that people can move between the document management system and that collaboration system securely and effectively. So that's how it was rolled out at Freshfields.
It is music to my ears. I remember Office 2010, so 13, 14 years ago, came out with co-authoring, and it was just, we all get to use this. And it's just been so obfuscated all this time. So it's wonderful that the workflow is being shepherded in this way. So Stuart, Adam mentioned the security word, and I'm just, really interested in hearing from you. Did you have any security concerns with client content in the cloud? And if so, what helped to allay your fears or your concerns or everyone else's fears and concerns?
Well, I would say as an IT director, you're always worried about security in some form or fashion. And so, yes, security was a concern of ours. We were concerned about where the documents were prior to us doing this, how they were being used, how they were being shared. We had a lot of issues. And we had moved to Microsoft about a year or two, 365 about a year or two before that. So we were now ready to kind of start looking at Teams and OneDrive collaboration. And so the controls that Microsoft has built around Teams and really their whole system gave us a lot of comfort in what we could do with conditional access rules, multi-factor authentication, auditing, all sorts of things. And so that really settled everybody down for the people who were using it. And now the challenge is just getting the rest of our client teams in it.
Okay. And did they like that experience once they got into it?
Well, the good news is it didn't really. Yes, I think for the people that are using it, they're very happy with it. Separate from the security, they're happy that we pump in. Adam was talking a little bit about this. We move over some of our permanent, we call them permanent files, that are not necessarily collaboration oriented that we keep in the document management system. We move that and some case information over to Teams. And so the attorneys really love the fact that this information is there in Teams at their fingertips, can be synced down to their laptop if they need it securely, and they can read it whenever they want on a plane, whatever. So that was great. Then you start layering on the controls, and thankfully the controls aren't that intrusive, whichever is the right word there. And we're not really having a lot of heartburn on that. So we're pleased with how it's turning out.
So it gets out of the way, and that really was what I was kind of wanting to find out, is that, did it feel, overly intrusive to them, and clearly not. So that's great. So Adam, same question for you. What did you do to allay the fears of either the firm or the clients, or again, how did you handle all of the security considerations?
Yeah, so I think all the same considerations as what Stuart was just mentioning, we faced at Freshfields. The one thing I'll just kind of come back to is people are already using these services in a way that is not currently governed. And so from a security perspective, that's the bigger risk here. So we have people that are already using OneNote to store, client and metadata, things that are existing in OneDrive as well. People are putting this information in one-on-one chats that I mentioned earlier. So there's a real need in order to put the security and governance solution around it. So the approach that we took at Freshfields was to partner very closely with our kind of security team and risk and compliance team as part of the kind of project to begin with. And they were with us at the very, very start of it to make sure that, all their kind of requirements and design decisions were baked into the actual project from the very beginning. But the key point that we wanted to kind of stress at the beginning was that this is actually a more secure way of the firm being able to use these collaboration features than what's currently happening. And so that was an argument that I think that we were particularly successful in being able to kind of deploy in the firm, that this is a way of making sure that people can take the benefits of these fantastic solutions, but do it in a way that's governed and is secured and is better than what the current processes are at the moment. So the current process is going to rely on people deleting the documents from their individual kind of OneNotes and OneDrives. And I think we all know that just doesn't happen. And now you've got shadow repositories, you've got client and metadata that you can't identify and can't locate. And that's where things start to get really, really tricky for firms and in a really dangerous position. So by using, solutions like CAM to put the governance layer on top of something like Teams, you actually made the whole thing much, much more secure.
Great. So Stuart, how did you determine the structure of the Teams, group that you created? Did you use focus groups? Did you use templates? How did that all work?
Well, we may have a unique setup at Sussman Godfrey, but we have an IT technology committee that is chaired by a partner who's highly technical, really, is into technology. And a few other partners sit on this firm, and they were the ones who actually architected how they wanted this system to work, because they're litigators, they're in it every day. Nice. And so, they're working with the paralegals, the secretaries, the external parties, everybody. So they really had a vision for what they wanted, and it seems to really be working well. So we didn't really have to go out to a major focus group. We did pilot it for quite a while and made some adjustments, but their initial concept pretty much hit it right on the mark.
That's fantastic. And I would imagine as well that as they evangelized it to the rest of the lawyers, that, it really hit the mark, because there's no translation, right? It's from the litigator's point of view. So that's awesome. Yes, I think everyone on the call is enviable of your tech committee. So
it's a great thing to have if you've got the right people on it.
Yeah, exactly. So Adam, how about you in your implementation?
Yeah, so we had quite a large design team that was looking at exactly how we kind of structure, how we kind of deploy teams generally. So I used to lead the innovation and product teams at Freshfields, and one of the things that we're lucky to have is a number of what we call legal product owners that come from different practice groups within the firms. So we had people that were representing transactional practice groups and people that were representing litigation practice groups. And really what they were charged with is coming up with the structure around how we kind of template out what these team sites look like. So the process at Freshfields is in order to request a team site, as part of a legal matter, you could either do it as part of the matter opening process. So as the matter was being opened, you could tick a box to say that you wanted a kind of team site, and it will be automatically kind of provisioned off the back of that for you. Based on the information that you put in your matter opening form, it recognized the type of matter that you were trying to open. So whether that was an M&A matter, a commercial litigation matter, an arbitration, tax matter, whatever it was, and provide you with the appropriate template. Or if you wanted to do it afterwards, you could go into a separate form in ServiceNow and request it. And then once you kind of requested the template that you wanted, you would get the team site, which has been pre-configured and pre-populated to the type of matter that you're working on. So what we did with the design team was we spent a lot of time with individual lawyers from each of these practice groups to find out what would be really helpful for them. What is the kind of channel structure that you'd want to see on an M&A transaction, as an example? And so, some of the typical things that you'd expect to see would be a channel around due diligence, which is where you'd manage every kind of thing that's related to the due diligence on that M&A transaction. Or if you're doing a litigation, all of the things that are relate to the pleadings that you want to do on that particular litigation. So we spent a lot of time with the individual lawyers and attorneys to map out what is the kind of right channel structure, which is really kind of just the way that you would run through that particular type of matter. Then we would work out what are the kind of appropriate tabs that we should pin to that channel, which are really, really helpful and contextual. So because there was that kind of really high touch, high value templating process that happens at the beginning of provisioning the team site, we had to spend quite a long time on the design of it. So the individual legal product owners that I mentioned were the ones that were spearheading that, but also closely involved were all of the relevant knowledge teams and continuous improvement teams within the firm that all kind of contributed to this design. So that was the team that was involved in kind of how each of these templated team sites looked. We also had a generic template as well. So if somebody just wanted to open up a blank team site, they could do that as well. They could select that as an option. But we found through the usage that most of the attorneys wanted to use templated features because of what I ran through earlier, which is the easy access to documents, the easy access to the legal technology that's relevant, the easy access to the knowledge material, and collaboration tools. So that's why more people tended to go down the templated path than just the kind of pure generic empty team site.
Wonderful. And you both have touched upon the weaving in of even some of these other services. So you mentioned ServiceNow and Stuart, things like OneNote or just, tabbing iManage there too. These things, being able to bring them all together. I can just imagine the lawyers would find this very tailored to what work they do, and they don't have to flip around. I know that in session 2, Jan spoke about the toggle tax, the alt tab that we do all the time from window to window to window. And so you both seem to have really set this up to help the lawyers work very successfully without that tax.
I think that's the power of Teams. It's giving you that kind of flexible framework and interface to be able to put everything in there. So that's why Freshfields found it a particularly valuable solution, because it was so flexible and it played so well with the other legal technology that the firm was using. So being able to kind of take the whole universe of what the firm would use, which, as I said, looks very different depending on the type of matter that you're working on, and then being able to do it all through one application that the lawyers were already using every day. For us, that was the main reason to go with it.
It's sort of the front end SharePoint never had,
Yeah, exactly.
So, Stuart, you did touch upon your pilot. Can you tell us a little bit more about the pilot and how did you gather feedback? Did you do anything formalized? And how did you implement what the feedback from the lawyers were?
Yeah, our firm works very real time in a matter of ways. So we did do a pilot. We ran it out to some of the partners. Some of the partners had some cases that they wanted to try it out on. So we did that, and we received pretty much instant feedback from them as they were going along. There wasn't a quote formal survey process or feedback process. When in a litigation firm, if somebody has a problem, they will let you know like immediately. So we were getting, some pretty constant feedback and making changes along the way, evaluating what they really wanted, seeing if what they were asking for was really the right change and, how the technology would work in the way they wanted to do it. Then we were working with, the CAM team that was helping us implement it. And we were just refining as we were going. It took a little while, but we eventually got it to where they were happy. And now when we roll out a team, there's really not a lot of questions on how to use it or what is this or what is that.
It also seems to me that everyone likely feels a part of it, right? Because they helped refine this and they helped refine that. So they have their own little mark on the way that it's set up, to their benefit. So that's awesome.
Yeah, that is true. And they're also, they want the firm to, everybody in the firm wants to be successful. So they're looking for a way to make sure all the parties are going to be happy or as happy as you can be with any particular solution, so that they will use it and continue to use it as we're going forward.
Great way to get the value out. So Adam, how about you all? What did you do for your pilot? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we started with a small group of kind of tech evangelists in each of the kind of practice groups and really just stress tested the kind of structure that I was just running through with each of the kind of attorneys. So we wanted them to run it on live matters and test the structure. Does the kind of channel structure work? Are you getting the right kind of pinned tabs? But it was also a bit of a kind of an education game as well, because we were trying to teach people how to get the most out of using something like Teams on legal matters. So whilst the kind of solution that Freshfields came up with was very templated to begin with, what we wanted to also kind of educate and demonstrate is that that's really just the starting point, and it's up to kind of each individual attorney that's running the matter to really customize it and make it their own. So we were teaching them how to tab different websites, which they found amazing. Like something super simple in relation to that was absolutely fantastic. So just teaching them around how to tab websites, tabbing individual documents through iManage or not through iManage to the actual channel structure, revolutionary. So, take due diligence example that I was just giving. One of the main things that lawyers have to find very, very quickly is where is the due diligence report? And so being able to kind of just tab that due diligence report to the due diligence channel, so it's super easy to find, just saves a whole lot of time. And, lawyers are all about efficiencies, doing things as quickly as they can. I love that kind of alt-tab tax that you were referring to earlier, Sherry. Anything we can do to reduce that kind of friction in running a matter, we definitely want to do, because we see the efficiency gains that come out from it. So that's what we were really testing as part of the pilot, to sort of test what was there already from the templating design perspective, but also what's actually helpful as we watch lawyers kind of go through this process of running a matter end to end through it. And the feedback that we got was very, very positive. And actually the thing that I took from it the most was everybody that was on the pilot was asking for multiple team sites for the other matters that they were on that didn't actually have them. And that's when I knew that we're on the right track, because, I think everybody on this call will know that if lawyers don't immediately see the value of the solution, they will stop using it and never touch it again. And the fact that we had basically everybody asking for this on each of their individual matters, we knew that this was something that was kind of really targeting real pain points that the lawyers have when running their legal matters. So that was the kind of biggest learning that came out of the pilot for us, and really pushed Freshfields to kind of accelerate that program as quickly as it could.
Very good. So Stuart, did you have any challenges in deploying Teams at all?
Yes and no. I mean, the initial, we were very early in the process of the CAM to iManage integration. So we had some challenges making all that work the way we wanted it to work, but it came together very well. And, we're very happy with it today. It's a lot smoother. Other than that, I mean, we already had, Teams was already installed on the people's workstations. Everybody kind of knew how to use a file sharing solution, teaching. There was training during the pandemic that, we had to come up with. But other than the initial setup, which was a little new to everybody, no, it wasn't that bad at all.
How did they weather all the changes? Because if I'm thinking back on this, it felt to us that we were getting, 12 changes every other day. Things were moving and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you for refreshing my memory. Microsoft was going through massive changes of Teams during the beginning of the pandemic and pretty much through the whole 2-year period. And it was a real challenge for the CAM team and developers to keep up with those changes. Now they're finally ahead of that, I think, and it's really settled down a lot. But Microsoft was, I will say, yes, we were pulling our hair out some in the beginning because Microsoft was making so many changes. I don't know why all of a sudden during the middle of the pandemic they decided to just throw every dollar they had at Teams and make every interface and feature change that they could think of, but they did. But we weathered it, and it's certainly a much improved product today than it was 2.5 years ago.
And kudos to your users for weathering it with, that's awesome. How about you, Adam? What sort of challenges did you have in deploying and sort of managing the change challenge that was occurring through much of this?
Yeah, I think that, just some kind of unusual things just cropped up that you just weren't expecting at the kind of beginning of the project. So one example, I was just talking before around how just even being able to kind of pin a website to a channel was quite revolutionary. Well, that actually took a lot of work internally to get comfortable with that. And the reason was because at the beginning of the pandemic, Freshfields had gone through an exercise where all Teams traffic was effectively split tunneled. So it could kind of bypass some of the VPNs to make sure that it didn't degrade video quality. And it was done because it was kind of fully encrypted through Microsoft, and they were able to kind of implement that. But now when we're kind of starting to introduce these changes, that would mean that we needed that traffic to go through the VPN and the kind of relevant firewalls in relation to that. So there was a bit of kind of configuration and architectural change which was needed to ensure that we could split tunnel the video traffic and then split tunnel all the rest of the traffic done a different way. So it's just things like that you didn't kind of expect at the start. So of course, when the decision was made to bypass the VPN for Teams, made complete sense to make sure that we didn't degrade the video challenge. But as we started to push the limits of what that application could do further and further, it then meant we had to kind of revisit some of the kind of previous architectural changes that we had initially decided on. So that was kind of one of the key pieces. I think the other sort of thing that came up was, how do we ensure that all of the information that exists within that team site is effectively backed up to the system of record? So, the document management system. And, this is where CAM is very helpful for being able to take each of the different solutions that exist within a SharePoint site, like the Files tab, and back that up to iManage. The conversation history that exists in the kind of post feature, take that and back it up into iManage. But there were some kind of unusual ones like, Planner and OneNote around how do you effectively back up those solutions and put a copy of that into iManage. So I'd say, because Freshfields was one of the kind of, like Stuart's firm was one of the very, very first movers to really start to use Teams on legal matters, there were some of those kind of questions which no one in the industry had looked at yet, and so finding the way through each of those things, and we're able to, with security and risk, come up with good solutions for each of those issues to ensure that all of that data ends up finding its way back into the system of record, being the document management system.
I think this really is such a great point at which to ask the question. I know, for instance, in Office 365, we have a lot of metrics we can gather about usage and utilization of the different components. And I'm curious, Stuart, do you track the use of Teams, even those things you're hosting in Teams? Do you track usage for that? And would you say it's widely used and adopted, or maybe estimate a percentage of users and lawyers who use the team sites to do all of their work?
Yeah, we don't normally go back and look at the metrics, but I mean, I can tell you anecdotally from what we see in the IT department, which is the adoption is there. The people using it like it, but you have, at least in our firm, a lot of litigators that are established in their processes and are difficult to get moved over to something new when they are currently working on a number of cases and they kind of have their process and their communications down the way they like it, even if it may not be ideal for them. So we have a good percentage of people using Teams. Well, I would say good percentage of trial teams using Teams.
Got it.
I would not say that we have the whole firm on it yet. I think every month we're gaining more, and it's just for our particular firm, it's just a process of getting everybody over when the timing is right for their particular case, or they've got a brand new case. They might start a brand new case in Teams and keep their other cases where they're at, as opposed to us migrating it over.
I see.
So it's a process and time for us, but it'll eventually get there.
And do they use some of the other components that you might have docked there? For instance, OneNote, as Adam mentioned, do they use OneNote or Planner or any of those tools?
It is available to them. I think some have played with Planner and haven't really gotten what they need out of it from a trial team perspective. I think, we use in departments, we use Planner and it works really well. On the trial team where they're running through task lists and all kinds of different things that they've got to do, they haven't quite found the right way to use it, and nor have we. OneNote is fairly heavily used. We, as Adam was talking earlier, we will occasionally pin some documents to the tab section, which might be a task list, a spreadsheet for a task list, or some things like that as they need it. But I think the adoption is going well. It's just a matter of time and where they are in a particular case.
Wonderful. That's great. So Adam, how about you all? Do you track the metrics, or did you track the metrics? Did you see utilization of OneNote or Planner or anything else go up? How did that look?
Yeah, so the main tracking metric was in relation to the number of team sites that were opened, and was seeing that jump up month on month quite exponentially, which was fantastic. So that suggested that people were coming back and using it more and more, and so you really kind of saw that kind of exponential trend line in terms of the number of team sites which were opened, which was fantastic. We didn't have metrics which looked at how they were using the individual components within that kind of team site. So, how many people were taking advantage of the OneNote, how many people were kind of taking advantage of the Planner. Anecdotally, though, the kind of feedback was that OneNote was wildly popular. And one of the things that that my team implemented at Freshfields while I was there was actually coming up with OneNote specific templates. So for all the firms that are on the call that don't yet know about this, you can actually create your own template structure within OneNote. Incredibly helpful and widely popular. So we had a number of kind of templates within OneNote that you could get from the templates menu. It was then broken down by the type of matter that you're working on. So if you're working on a transactional matter, one of the things that you could track was a due diligence request list, for example. If you're doing litigation, if you're kind of tracking correspondence, like a correspondence tracker that you would normally have on a litigation matter, we had really kind of advanced templates sitting in OneNote for that. So anecdotally, the kind of the feedback was OneNote was widely popular. Planner was actually much more adopted than I was expecting it to be. I was thinking, for me, it was a bit of an experiment to kind of see how we would go with it. The way that it was implemented at Freshfields was when you opened up one of these team sites, you would get a pre-populated planner. And the way that the pre-populated planner was set up was it was actually an interactive end-to-end process map for how to run that transaction. So coming back to my M&A example, you would have, here are all the introduction steps that you should do when you open a new M&A matter. Set up a data room, set up the Transact site, open a Kira project, etc. All of those kind of key things that you needed to do would be kind of mapped out end to end on the planner board. And the idea behind it is that you go in as a junior associate or a managing associate and you just start to curate that list. So add the things that weren't there or delete things that weren't applicable, and then start tagging people in that needed to complete those particular tasks. So what we were looking at is, could you take Planner and turn it into an interactive end-to-end process map that is continuously updated? So that's what we did in relation to Planner. And as I said, it took off much more than I was expecting it to, because there are a variety of legal project management tools out there on the market at the moment, and Freshfields experimented with a number of them, and some were successful, some not really. Lawyers didn't love moving out of something into kind of a completely new tool to manage the phases of their matter. But we were using this as a bit of an experiment to sort of say, could you actually use the power of Planner in this way? And the feedback that was coming from it was that it was particularly helpful, especially for those people that were acting on multiple different matters at any one time. So take a practice group like the real estate practice group or the financial regulatory practice group that had multiple matters open at any one time. One of the great things about Planner is that you can aggregate all the tasks that have been assigned to you across multiple different planners. So, what we were hearing from those specialists was really, really easy for them to see, okay, they needed to do this on matter X and this on matter Y on any particular day, rather than kind of have to scramble around and look through emails. So that's hopefully answering your question around sort of the usage of those underlying tools.
It's just always interesting to see how it takes off and how often we are surprised, right?
Yeah, exactly.
In good ways, not always bad ways, in good ways. So Stuart, I wanted to ask you, in terms of sharing teams externally, can you tell us a little bit about what that process is like? Because we've sort of talked about how our internal users are using it. So share with us what your external users setting them up is like.
Sure. The external, really, it's a fairly simple process in our environment. When we set up a team, the billing partner and a paralegal are usually the owners of the team, and then they can assign some other owners if they so choose. IT doesn't, is kind of out of it at this point. And our teams are set up to allow for external sharing by design. And so the owners of the team will put in whoever they need to be a part of the team. And BAM sharing is pretty much, as far as I'm concerned, done. We have different channels in our team. There's a public channel. Well, there's two private channels and one non-private channel in our team. Okay, so the private channels are not to be shared externally, and the public channel, if you want to call it that, in the private team, is designed for anybody external.
Wonderful. So, and because these external users are already using Teams on sort of, their own stuff, what about like their training or their guidance or, giving them the lay of the land?
Yeah, we have a QRC, a quick reference card that can be sent that the trial team has access to, and they can send out to anybody they want. From what we found, very honestly, the people who have used Teams in some fashion or another, some of our clients, and whatnot that are large companies that already are on Teams. They have like no problem with this whatsoever. Where we sometimes get into a challenge, shall I say, is when we're dealing with an expert or somebody who's not a 365 user or hasn't really seen Teams before. Those people take a little bit of work to kind of get them going, but the QRC that we can provide them, it really gives them all they really need to know.
Well, that's fantastic. So how about in the Freshfields case, Adam? What's the external process like there?
Yeah, so a bit different to what Stuart just mentioned, which is Freshfields don't allow any externals into the actual main team site that's been created. So the approach at Freshfields was to have an architecture where you would have an internal team site for internal collaboration. And if you wanted to do external collaboration, you would then request a completely separate and different team site where everything is open to the external party at that particular point. So this was before kind of Microsoft released its kind of shared channels feature, which is quite an interesting development there. But I don't think that's kind of changed the approach fundamentally, which is you have an internal team where everything that you do is just for internal collaboration. And then if you have the mindset that the external site, everything is visible, absolutely everything. So whatever you do in that kind of external site will be visible to the client. So that kind of demarcation was particularly important to Freshfields, and particularly important to the kind of risk and compliance teams, so that you knew that everything that you were doing in that kind of external space was visible versus the internal space. What they were particularly concerned about, the security teams, was making sure that you didn't accidentally post something in the kind of public channel, as Stuart was just kind of referring to, which was meant for the private channel. So that's why the approach of Freshfields was to have two completely different teams groups, two completely different sites, which were separated from one another. But the approach at Freshfields was really to get comfortable with internal collaboration first, and make sure that all the kind of lawyers and attorneys were used to the way it was working, and then kind of opening up to external. But again, you can be really surprised around how quickly certain things take off. So, from the beginning of the pilot, one of the requirements was, oh no, this would be great if we could, collaborate with the barristers over here in the UK to be able to kind of co-author a particular document together between Freshfields and the barristers. So that kind of external collaboration was one of the kind of key features that was cropping up really, really early. So again, I was suitably impressed with how a huge proportion of the firm kind of just embraced the possibilities of these new ways of working.
It's wonderful. And, we've kind of moved through the whole process of the matter, actually, right? So, Stuart, our final sort of question here is, tell us what happens when a matter concludes. What do you all do? What's your process like?
Well, so far we haven't had a matter conclude that's on Teams. Our trials tend to take a little while, so it's not very, we're not transactional where things happen real quick. That said, again, one of the main reasons we went to Teams was governance, and getting all the matter data that was being used outside of iManage into something like a matter-centric file, which Teams basically does for you, was important. So now that we're starting to get that, we will be implementing retention and closing out the matter in Teams. When accounting triggers a close on the case, we will have some processes that will go back and close out the matter in Teams, and put whatever information we need back into iManage. Not everything in the team is going to go into iManage.
Right.
Because only certain parts of it are actually really appropriate for keeping in the document management system. And then we will, expire the team programmatically.
Wonderful.
So, and we were really looking forward to that part of it, really.
Yeah, I would imagine, because today, or prior, I should say, if it was a manual process, that seems quite the collection to try to gather up.
For sure, especially when they're using, they could be using ShareFile or Dropbox or some other cloud things. Sometimes it's the client-directed place that we don't normally use. I mean, who knows where the data could be. This really helps us out a lot.
That's great. And Adam, how about at Freshfields?
Yeah, I think this is what highlights the real need to make sure that any firms that are thinking about going down this journey does it with a robust governance solution like CAM. So you can make sure that you're doing this in a way that you can actually track that data, which is when does a matter close? So, the benefit of using a governance solution like CAM is that you can have that information, that metadata mapped at a master level to understand when a matter closes, so you can close out that kind of team site and make sure you copy all the material that you want to copy from that team site over into iManage as a system of record. So that's why I think it's incredibly important to use those kind of robust governance tools in order to do that. But that's the process. Freshfields, I think, opens a lot of new matters every single year. And if you were to put absolutely all of that through Teams and not close it down effectively, you would just get this massive sprawl of team sites that are never cleaned up. So it's very, very important that you have that kind of full life cycle management, not only about how you can make it super easy to open the matters, but if it's been inactive for a period of time, getting a report that shows you that there has been no activity on that so you can proactively reach out and close it down. Or if the matter is closed, then reach out and do the same thing. So that's why governance solutions like CAM are so kind of critical to that end-to-end lifecycle management of making sure that you're running your kind of teams for legal matters in the most efficient way possible.
Well, first of all, I can't believe that we've spent the entire hour, and really, honestly, what you two have shared is amazing. Our audience has asked, actually, what advice would you give to other law firms considering implementing CAM for Microsoft Teams, implementing Teams for legal matters? Stuart, can we start with you?
Sure. I mean, I would say the first thing I guess there's a couple of things. One, try and find out where all your data is and how your people are using it. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then two, spend a lot of time, or as much time as you can, understanding how they are going to use the Teams. Teams has a lot of features. It has a lot of stuff you can do with it. And you could quickly get overwhelmed by everything that it does if you're not careful. So break it down into pieces, figure out what your people need and want, and just start there, okay? You don't have to, but Adam may have a different approach to this, but you don't have to do the whole thing soup to nuts at one time. That's the beautiful thing about CAM. Okay, you can start it here, and then you can go with an eye towards, we're going to plan for this down the road. Maybe it's 6 months from now, maybe it's after we prove this other phase up, and then you just start implementing the pieces as you go. So that would be my recommendation for doing it. And make sure you get attorney buy-in, if nothing else.
That's great advice. Thank you. And Adam, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think, for anyone that's, in the kind of IT department or innovation department at firms, the key is to deliver value as quickly as you possibly can. And that I agree with what Stuart said. Take an iterative approach, deliver value as early as you can, and build from there once you get feedback from lawyers around how they're liking using this solution. So I fully echo that approach.
Well, we have taken the entire hour. We're landing right at the top of the hour here. Stuart and Adam, thank you so much for sharing all of your good counsel and experiences and stories and the benefits that it's brought each of your firms, users and lawyers and clients. I think that's the most amazing sort of frosting on the cake, right? But thank you again for joining us today. Thank you to our audience for participating today. And we wish you all a great rest of your day and week. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Much.
Yes, thank you.